That is a demo. Driver? Did you check a demo? In Tuesday? There are the people present inside all the
Okay, so now we'll start talking about how to develop softwares on Google Glass. If you don't mind, let me just shut this door first. It's a bit noisy up there. Okay, so there are mainly two software libraries that you can use to develop software for Google Glass. One is Mirror API and GDK. And for this session, we'll be just going over through the concepts of the two development environments so that you can feel which SDK or which tool you might need for developing certain applications. And then the rest of the morning, once I've finished this introduction session, we'll go through a little bit more detail on how to use the Mirror API for development. And then for tomorrow and the day after, we'll try to start looking into GDK development. So first of all, you might have tried this Glassware website using your glass, I believe. So there are many different types of glasswares out there already. So some of them are using a web-based service to push new updates to your timeline. Some of them are running on your glass as a native application, such as a interactive game or something like that. So there are a mixture of different types of applications with Glassware. And by the way, they call the application for Google Glass as Glassware. So don't be surprised with the term Glassware. And basically what Google Glass shows on the screen uses a timeline metaphor. I think Mark might have talked a little bit about the timeline metaphor you have on the glass. So basically what you see on the screen with the glass is when you first turn on the screen, it starts with the present screen, which is showing the clock, the time of the present time. And the timeline on the Google Glass is basically sorted based on the time. So on the right side of your current present view is the past, a record of past, whether you made a Google search or if you received a card before, then it will stack onto the right side of the timeline. And on the left side of the timeline, it shows the future or the ongoing task. So if you swipe backwards or swipe right to the right, then you'll see the cards that shows the current status, such as the weather, or if you have a stock ticker, then it will show you the stock prices and so forth. Or if you have some kind of application that measures the time, such as the timer or the stopwatch, then it will show up on the left side of the timeline. So please be minded of that. And based on these two different side of the timeline, you might need to use different software tools to develop softwares for those cards sitting on the left side and the right side. So a card on a timeline usually has a kind of, first it has a, of course, obviously it's a card, so it has a content, such as a picture or some text. But what it also has is some interactivity with it. So if you tap on the card, it usually shows up a menu item, such as either you can reply to the card or let the Google Glass to read out using text-to-speech engine. And once you select one of the menus, then it will show you another screen, either to say something to dictate to reply, and then it will go through another bunch of set of slides. And then eventually, it will end up adding another card to your timeline or just finishing your interactivity. So Google Glass interface is basically based on this card type interaction, which is quite similar to Google Wear, which they have just released. They have a slightly different UI design, but the concept is quite similar between the Google Glass interface and the Google Wear and Google Now environment. So, so when you develop a Glassware with a timeline, it depends on, again, on which side your card wants to sit, and that decides which tool you have to use. So on the right side of your timeline, which represents the past, are called static cards, which is, has limited interactivity. So on the cards on the right side of your timeline is mostly just showing a content and has limited interactivity, such as choosing menu items to do further interaction. On the left side of your timeline sits more interactive applications, such as a timer that updates frequently, or a kind of a game that works actively sits on your timeline and updates frequently, and so forth. So, so usually when you want to develop something for the right side of the timeline, which is static cards, you'll have to use mirror APIs, which is a server-based API. And if you want to develop something that sits on the left side of your timeline, you usually end up using the GDK, which is basically Android development. So there are basically three types of glassware. In fact, there are two types of glassware, but if you go a little bit into a little bit more details, then it's can categorize into three types, which is first is static cards, which again sits on the right side of the timeline, which is static content with text and HTML or images. And then when you tap on it, you see some menus, and then you interact with them further. But it doesn't have much active interactivity, so to say. On the left side of your timeline, there are live cards, which is again showing up-to-date information that updates frequently. And for the example of those are compass or timer. So if you start your Google Glass and say, OK, Glass, start a timer, then it will put a timer on the left side of your timeline. Or if you start a compass, then it will again sit on the left side of your timeline. And these type of cards are updated frequently, such as every second or every half a second or so. So that's there. But still, it has a dynamic content and could be updated frequently. And you can also tap and choose different menus. But the interactivity is still quite limited with simple tapping and choosing the menus and so forth. And the third category of the glassware is called immersions. And this is the most interactive stuff you can do with the glassware, which is basically Android apps. So it's if you write an immersion app, it's quite similar to writing Android apps, which is taking over the screen, and you can control everything from swiping on the touchpad, using camera or whatever. These types of immersions are basically Android applications that actually takes over the whole control out of the timeline, and you can do whatever with the device. And the most common example is interactive games. So again, there are different types of applications that you can think of with the glassware. If you're developing a website, such as a news website, and if you want to feed some cards to the user, then you'll have to start looking into static cards, and which will end up with using Mirror API. And if you want to have a live card sitting on your timeline, such as a compass or timer, or if you want to track health application and so forth, and if you want to update those on your glass and access on the timeline, then you might want to develop live cards using active GDK components. Or if you want to simply build, if you already have an Android app and if you want to simply run it on Google Glass, then you can go with immersions, which will be simply running on the Google Glass, but you might have to change some of the user interface, of course, because it's quite small screen and you have different interaction with the touchpad. But anyway, those are the three classes. And to develop those three types of applications, there are basically two tools, which is one, Mirror API, which is server-based programming, and which is basically making a website for Google Glass. And you can add static cards and timeline and so forth. It has limited interaction, but it's quite has enough to deal with timeline-based static cards, such as you can reply to it, you can dictate your voice, you can send a camera, you can send a picture you took from the camera, and so forth. So you can still think of kind of various activities you can still do with the static cards. So that's Mirror API. GDK is basically based on Android programming. So you code with Android SDK. And the GDK adds a little bit of more application, more API that's specific to the Google Glass that makes it easier to make the UI similar to the timeline, and also provides some useful APIs that is specific to Glass. So here's the website here, which is a website to developers guide, and most of my slides are based on the content on this website as well, so feel free to go there and try to browse. Let me actually open it up for you. So developer.google.com/glass. So that's the URL, developer.google.com/glass. If you go there, there should be, they added quite a lot of introduction material, but we won't be bothered, and just click this develop and then click this platform overview. Then it will come to the core of the content, which is, make it slightly bigger. So which is, has an overview of the platform, and it has also guides for GDK, guides for Mirror APIs, and reference to all the APIs that have, and also have a tools section down here where you can download. I don't think you can really download something from here except the system kernel image when you need it for, if you want to reset or downgrade your firmware version. But anyway, here are some of the tools you can try and so forth. So most of the material you need to learn is mostly in this website about the Google Glass, and many of the slides are taking some of the materials from that web page. And also in my slides there should be links like this that points to that website that if you want to read further about that API. So coming back to the Mirror API, so for this session I'll be just briefly going over the two development methods, which is Mirror API and SDK, GDK, and give you a little bit of feeling how this works, so that you can start looking into those. So the Mirror API is basically a server-based, web-based API, and it's a REST API. First of all, let me ask you, how many of you have some active web development background? A little bit, okay. Any of you have used PHP or PHP? Yes? Purely HTML? Okay, .NET, okay, .NET, that's good. And also, anyone that did Java Servlet? No, so don't worry, we'll learn how to do that. Java Servlet is basically a Java program that prints out the web page. Okay, that's it's quite similar to the word just got off my mind, which is C-based.
Server-side program just like PHP.
Yes, PHP, or PHP is a script-based language. Oh, CGI, sorry. So it's kind of old technology, CGI, which you write a C program to print out the HTML pages. It's basically the same of the Java. So you write the Java program that prints out the Java, prints out the HTML code, and you can also write your own Java code as well. So it supports, since it's a REST-based API, whatever tool or language that you can use to create HTTP call to the server, you can use it. It supports PHP, Go, Python, Ruby, .NET, or even you can use your own C code if you have HTTP kind of classes that you can call to. So it's a REST-based API, which is basically a URL on Google's server. So you call the Google's Mirror API server with URL, and it will give you back some results, or it will update the glass. So this diagram shows how it works. And as you can see here, how the Mirror API works is you write your service, which is your website. You write your website, and your website actually calls the Google website, which is a Mirror API web server. So you call the Google web server, your website web server calls the Google web server through HTTP calls, and it will ask it to either add a static card or ask it to notify your web server when there's some changes that the end user made on their glass and so forth. And what Google server does, it syncs with the glass. So you don't interact directly with the glass at all. So you are always talking to the server that Google runs for the Google Glass, the Mirror API server. And then the Google server will talk to the glass. So it's not real-time interaction, so to say, but it's quite fast enough to do most of the interactive stuff. So you'll see in a minute anyway.
So this is just like a push notification.
Yeah, it's just like a push notification.
Which requires the internet connection.
Yeah, exactly. It requires an internet connection. So what you write is your web page on a web server, and your customers or the users will log into your website using the Google Glass, and it will receive updates such as the application you see like CNN or New York Times that puts cards into your timeline. That's basically these kind of applications. They run their own web page and call Mirror API to the Google server, pushing some content, and it will show you some cards. But it's not only limited to just simply pushing the content, but you can actually interact with it, such as replying to that card, and your Google, in your website or the Mirror application can receive those, such as a text reply or an image took by a photo or so that you can. It's basically like you interact with your website. So.
If you want, I assume you have to subscribe that service first.
Yes, you have to subscribe first. So how you subscribe, I'll show you in a minute. But it's basically on a desktop, you go open up a website and then log in with the Google account that is tied to your glass, and then it will start receiving the notification from there. So it's timeline-based apps, mostly static cards, although you can kind of mimic live cards, but it's basically mostly for static cards. And you can also manage timelines, such as subscribe to timeline notifications, such as if user does something on the timeline, then your web server can be notified and do something with that. Or you can also do some simple interactions, such as sending images or receiving images and processing it on your server and then sending it back to the glass and so forth. Or you can also actually monitor the location of your user as well. So if the user enters certain places, then the Google server will notice it, and then the Google server will tell your web server that your user has entered certain place or something. Of course, the user has to subscribe it and grant you the access to your location. So with a little bit more of diagram how all this works. So what you are developing is this box on the right side, which is Glassware web app, which is basically a website, okay? And what your user does here on the left side is using his glass or her glass, and once the user authenticates or grants the access to your glass. So first, user have to log in to your web page to grant access to your glass timeline, and once you've logged in, your website will talk to the Google server, this is Mirror API is basically Google server, Google's Mirror API server. So your website talks to the Mirror API, asking insert a static card. Then what the Google server does is talk to the user's glass again, and then inserts a card to the user's glass, and the user sees it. So basically, what the Mirror API does is it sits in the middle between your user's class and your website and makes it talk to each other. So here is a little bit more complicated application. So this is again a web page or a website you've made that calls the Mirror API. Another example is once the user authenticates, you can actually insert a contact, which is a contact means a URL to your website. So the Google Glass knows your website. And the user can also take a photo using standard feature on your Glass. And the user can actually share the photo to your website, okay? So if it shares the website and then it talks back to the Mirror API and then talks to your server and it uploads the photo from the Glass to your web server, and then your web server will be notified that the user uploaded the photo, and you can process that photo on the server using whatever server technology you have, and then you can put back that processed image into the timeline asking the Mirror API, and then the end user will get a processed image as well. So again, it's not only for pushing the content, but you can actually upload images or text to your website, and then your website can process it and put it back to the timeline. And this is about the location update. So when the user moves around and the location is updated, the Mirror API, which is the Google's own web server, notices it and tells your web server, and then your web server can push some contents based on the location as well. So developing with Mirror API, you'll need to create a project on Google API console. We'll go through this in the next session, so don't worry much about it. You'll have to prepare your web server. Of course, you'll have to create a web page, so you need a web server, but we'll use Google service for this for today. And you can create a web application using Java or PHP or whatever, and then you can use that web page to make REST API calls to the Mirror API server. So how the Mirror API looks is in raw HTTP call is basically what your application is doing is calling to this host, which is Google server. This is Google's website, so it's run by Google. And it's calling with HTTP protocol, sending some JSON objects. So once you send some JSON objects to certain URL, then the Mirror server, or the Google server will process it, and then it will give you back some results, okay? And it might be, and while it gives back some results, it also pushes the content to the user's Glass as well. But since it's quite cumbersome to every time write this HTTP call and so forth in raw HTTP call, what Google does is provides this API, which creates this HTTP call and then take care of it. So they have so they wrap this into Java classes or Python classes or PHP modules. So what you do in your web page or website is just simply create some timeline item, which is static cards, and then set the content like text, and then you ask the service to insert that timeline item, which is that card you created, and then call to execute, and it will talk to the Mirror API server and then execute that.
So it's all the message you push your server side generates will get pushed into the Google Mirror API server, then gets
forwarded to the Glass, yeah. And if your call was asking something from the Glass, then it will also give you back the results through HTTP results. So again, it's basically making HTTP calls to the Google server. Google provides this Java, Python, or PHP. I think they also provide Go kind of functions or small library that generates the HTTP calls. So you can work with that. This is a sample Java servlet written in Java. So what it all does is first gets access to the Mirror API and gets access to the timeline, which is your user's timeline on your Glass. And then you create a timeline item, which is a static card, so to say. and then set the content. And then this is also, again, setting the content, such as the date stamp, timestamp. And then you can also get URL of a image and so forth. And then you ask the timeline, which was from here, to insert that card, which was timeline item you've just set up. And then call this method to execute. And at the point you execute it, it will talk to the Google server and put this timeline item to your user. And
so on the glass side, it just you don't need to do anything, is it?
You don't need to do anything.
So all the command was done on the server side.
On the server side, exactly. So the Mirror API is all server based. So you don't do anything on the Google Glass. Of course, you'll have to use your Glass to test if it's working properly. But other than that, in terms of development, it's all server-based programming.
So we don't need to design any client-side application which receiving those messages from the server.
Yeah, no, you don't need anything. In fact, your application doesn't have to be even on the Google My Glass website. So in the My Glass website, was it here? So if you go to the Glassware, there are a bunch of Glassware here, which is officially supported applications. But with Mirror API, it doesn't necessarily have to be here. So you can run your own website, and your users can log into your website and give access to your Glass. Then that's it. So still, the Mirror API server kind of works as a middleman, but it's pretty much your web server talking to the Mirror API server, and that's it. So
I thought that Mirror API knows where those messages goes to. So they assume the customer has to have Gmail login.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have a Gmail account to be able to subscribe.
So to subscribe, they open up your website using a desktop web browser and log in with the Google account that is tied to your Google Glass. Okay. So that's kind of simple, and that code is running here. So if you try to open up this URL from your website, which is hello-glass-mirror.appspot.com, and you'll see just simply this page. Let me open it myself. Hello-glass-mirror.appspot.com. Hello. Okay, so this is the website. I'll log out first to make it similar to yours. So, spot. Sorry. Hello-glass. Okay. Why am I still logged in? Okay, I think I'm logged in with my account. So let me just open up incognito window. Hello-glass. That's better. Still saying logout. Okay. Anyway, if you click Hello-glass here, I'm pretty sure it will ask to log in. And you will have to log in with the Google Glass account. So it will, because the push notification will go to the Glass account, not your account. So
if I click the Hello-glass, it says why you timeline Hello-glass how insert it.
maybe you're already logged in with your Google Glass account. Try to log out and try to log it. Try if it's already inserted into timeline, then maybe try to log it out and so all the user have to do is just log in with their account. I'm trying to log in with Little Glass 1, which might be the white one. So if I sign in, it will ask it will kind of show you this kind of granting the access to your timeline. And if you accept it, then try to press it again, then it will say class inserted into timeline. And if you look at the white one, it will kind of have a small card inserted to the right side of your timeline, I guess, if it's on the Wi-Fi.
What's the password for the file?
Sorry?
Password for the feedback file.
Oh, okay, that's on the Google Shared Drive.
Oh.
So Google Shared Drive, it's basically
Yeah, about
yeah. It depends on your number of your glass, and I think you're using 5. Yeah, that's one. Okay. And if you were successfully logged in, then you might have seen this kind of asking for access to the, and then this will show you this message on the website. And what you see on the glass should be this, looks like this. On your glass, there will be a card inserted like this.
Oh, I log into his class 5 account with Wi-Fi in Gmail, but how do I know? How do I know whether my glass has the it's already being.
It's already logged in. So when you set it up, it should be logged in. Is it showing?
I saw these 2 pictures yesterday. I'm not quite sure. So.
Okay. It should have a kind of timestamp on the bottom right corner saying just now as well. Or if it didn't got the message, then maybe try to see if it's on the Wi-Fi properly. So go to the settings and.
Sorry, I don't have a button. Ask the.
How to connect it to the QR code?
Oh, okay. Could you give it to me? So it should be on the Wi-Fi already because.
Are you able to generate that QR code with the correct password?
Oh, have you locked it? Looks like you've created a lock.
It's connected to the internet.
Oh no! I mean, have you created a locking gesture on this glass? Looks like you've. Yeah, it's connected. Okay. Yep. So if you, it's connected. So if you just simply on the clock screen, if you swipe right, you would see this kind of card, which might say Hello Glass 2, which is I was testing the code and should be Hello Glass 2. You'll have to log in with that glass as Mark's account, which I don't have the password. Let me see if this is or not. Somehow it's still.
Where's the how to set up Wi-Fi?
Could you? Okay. Just swipe back a couple of times. Swipe back again. And that's actually it's on Wi-Fi. It's
Really?
saying Wi-Fi data. So it's on Wi-Fi, so it should be fine. If you could go back to the clock screen.
Oh, it's connected.
Yeah, it's connected.
Oh, great.
So if you could go back to the clock screen and then swipe forward. Can you just log into that website again? Okay. Then, yep, it should have here. And log in with Glass5. Okay. And then try to click it again. Okay, it will take some time, but it usually happens quite instantly, like 2-3 seconds. But sometimes it takes a minute. If it beeped, and it means something added to your timeline. So if you try to look right next to your yep. So you should have received a card. Okay. So
this is a static card. Can't do anything.
Can't do anything. It's a static card. We'll learn how to add menu items to that static card, such as you can make it read aloud, or you can reply to it, and so forth. But for now, the code I've shown you here is just adding a static card. Okay, so there was nothing more than that. So I was just trying to demonstrate how the Mirror API works at the high level concept. So that's pretty much all what you do with Mirror API. So that's Mirror API. Maybe I'll go forward with GDK, just introducing you what Mirror.
So with second card, so once it's added to your timeline, you have to remove that.
You cannot remove it from the glass. You'll have to. So you can create. So it all depends on how you write your web application. So if you provide a tool that you can delete, so such as in the card, you can add a menu item that deletes the item. Okay. But the card I've just inserted doesn't have any menu item, which means you cannot really delete it until I provide a server-side code that makes your card deletable. Okay. So that's actually one of the troubles many Glass users complain about. But anyway, so that's Mirror API, which is server-based API. And the second part of the tutorial will be covering GDK. So now I'll again go over a brief overview of the GDK again. I won't touch that much detail for now, but we'll go into details from tomorrow. So GDK is Glass Development Kit, which is actually Android 4.8.3. I forgot to update this slide, which is now actually 4.4.2. Sorry about that. So it was initially 4.0.3. Now they updated to 4.4.2, which is KitKat plus Glass-specific APIs. And you basically use standard Android development tools such as ADT bundle, ADT with Eclipse, or as you've mentioned yesterday, you can also use Android Studio if you want. But the reason why we are using Eclipse for this class is because we also have Mirror API component to it. So you'll have to use Eclipse to make it easier with the Mirror API. But anyway, GDK is basically Android development. And if you have previous experience with Android development, it's pretty much straightforward. And the small APIs that GDK adds up is you can access to the timeline and cards. The previous version allowed you to add static cards, but the updated version doesn't anymore. But still, you can get access to the live card side of the timeline. And it provides some useful classes, such as menu and UI-related classes, so that you don't have to build everything from scratch, but you can just call those classes, and it will make the UI consistent with the timeline UI. And it also provides some gesture recognizers that might be specific to Google Glass, and also some small additional classes that might be specific to accessing some of the devices on the glass. And using GDK, you can basically create two types of applications, which is live cards or immersions. Okay, again, live card sits on the left side of your timeline, showing updated information, but doesn't has that much of interaction other than tapping and choosing menu items. But if you want to do more interactive applications, then you can go with immersions, which takes over the whole interface, and you can do whatever with the hardware on the glass. So how the live card works is, if you know a little bit about the Android development, but it's not necessary to understand it fully. So just we'll give you a high-level concept. So say this is the timeline of yours, and again, static cards sits on your right side, live cards sits on your left side. How the live cards are added is run as a service, which is basically background application running on the glass. So if you're using an Android phone, I'm pretty sure you might have some service running on the background. So that's how the live card works. So it runs as a service on the background, and it asks the the Glass operating system to add a live card to the timeline. And and you can pretty much update the content in whatever way. So you can access to the sensor, you can update the content displayed on this side on the live card and so forth. And when the user taps, it calls back your service, and you can handle that tap afterwards. On the other side, immersion, when you start an immersion, it basically takes away the whole screen, and it's basically escaping out from the timeline, but it's kind of taking the whole screen, and you can do whatever type of interaction or style you want. Live cards are, this is kind of summary of the three types of applications. And again, depending on what type of applications you are going to develop, you might have to choose one of those and try to use that. And so it's basically static card and live card sits on the timeline, immersion doesn't. Access to the user input static cards is very limited with just menu items. Live cards likewise, but it can also add a little bit more interactivity. Immersions have very rich live content with interaction as well. Sorry? Which one? Immersion? This one. So if you start immersion does anything with the timeline. So it doesn't appear in the timeline, but it kind of pauses the timeline, and your application takes over everything. So basically, the meaning of appears in the timeline is if you swipe forward or backward, you can go through the cards. But if you run an immersion application, even if you swipe, it doesn't show the timeline. So it takes over the whole application until you stop the immersion. So if you stop the immersion, you go back to the timeline. So immersion is basically like an Android app. If you launch an app, you don't see the home screen anymore until you quit that app. But the live card is kind of an application sitting in the home screen. So you can still see the updates on the screen within the home screen, like the widgets, exactly like the widgets on the Android phone. So you can have updated informations, and access it very quickly on the home screen, like in the timeline. But you don't have much interactivity like the actually full-blown app. So again, it's using Android settings. We won't go much into details with this. We've already explained about turning on the debugging and so forth. So we'll look into more details about GDK development tomorrow. And here's a small example, which is launching with a voice trigger and using so this sample application. What it will do is you will be able to launch it with saying OK Glass and the Hello World, and it will launch an app. This is an immersion app, by the way, and it will be a full screen application, it will show a small message, hello Glass. And if you touch on the touchpad, it will update the touch coordinates so that you can do something with that. So here's a code. If you are very aware of Android development, then this might make sense, but if you're not, it might be a little bit complicated, but don't worry, we'll revisit them tomorrow in details. So the only difference with the standard Android application is getting rid of the theme. So usually Android application has themes, but if you just get rid of the themes, Google Glass will replace the theme with its own theme. So not specifying the theme itself is the first starting point. And you can add these intent filters that replies to the voice trigger, where you say, OK, Glass, and then say something. It triggers your app. So if you add this voice trigger to your manifest file, then that will do that. And within the activity, it's pretty much the same. It's pretty much the same as plain Android app, which sets your content view with the UI layout you define in XML file. And the only difference is this callback, which is on Android application, it's called on touch event, right? Or on touch motion event. I can't recall it exactly, but anyway, it's called, I'm pretty sure it's called on touch event or something like that. But on the Glass, since it's not a touch screen, but it's a touchpad, which is different from the screen, you'll have to listen to this on generic motion event, and that's it. So if you're running, of course, you'll have to make the UI to squeeze into the small size. And if you want to do more with the card style interaction, then you'll have to use GDK application and so forth. But other than that, if you have an Android application, if you want to turn it into a Glass application, that's pretty much what you all have to do. So before I summarize it, let me just show you that app running. So by the way, if you want to follow me, if you have downloaded those codes and unzipped it, you can actually import it into your Eclipse now. So in Eclipse, make sure you're in Java perspective. So on the top right corner, click this Java perspective here. And in Eclipse, click File, and then Import. And then if you choose this General tab, there will be a category called Existing Projects into Workspace. And by the way, if you are, sorry about that, if you have downloaded the projects, make sure you have unzipped it. So now what I'm going to do is import this project here, which is GDK0 Hello Glass API 19. So once you have unzipped it and come back to the Eclipse and choose this existing project into Workspace, and if you click Next, you'll have a dialog saying select the root directory, which is basically you'll have to choose that unzipped project. So for me, it's here. So again, I'll do it from the first. So File, Import, and then General, and then Existing Projects into Workspace, and then click Next, and click the Browse button, and browse to where you unzipped the project you've downloaded. Now I'm going to import the GDK0 Hello Glass API 19, and choose the folder inside it, which shows this content. So the folder you choose has to have these project files, okay? Once you choose that directory, the dialog will show that you can choose the projects here, the list of the project here. And then make sure you take this copy projects into Workspace, otherwise it will do something. I mean, it will leave your project in where you unzipped it. So it's better to just click this copy projects into Workspace.
The code that we should download is 00.
The code I'm importing now is GDK0. Yeah, you can also import the mirror 0 if you want. I'll do that in a minute or in the next session. But for now, we'll just import the GDK0. So the code I'm importing is again hello GDK0 hello glass dash API 19, and within that unzipped folder there should be another folder called hello glass, and you choose that folder, and then click open, and it will show up the project in the middle of this dialog box. And make sure you click this copy projects into workspace because that makes easier with the relative path thing. And if you click finish, it will start reading those projects into your workspace, and you'll see this project imported. Everyone happy so far? Can you make sure it's hello? It's the GDK application. That should be fine. Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah. Make sure you're importing the GDK0 project, not the Mirror API project. So Mirror API, I'll do it in the next session. Okay. So once you have that imported, the only thing you have to do is right-click that project and choose Run As and Android application. And if you have your Glass plugged in, then your Glass will show that application running. By the way, it's better to make sure your Glass is turned on, the screen is turned on before you run it.
Do I have to keep that project working?
No, you don't. Usually you don't have to. So import existing projects and then choose the folder. So I'll go around and help you a little bit. So is it not? Yeah, you don't have to do that. Then once you've done, you have that, and then you can right-click on that Glass, and then run as Android application. And make sure your Glass screen is turned on when you run it. Otherwise, it will quit immediately. Yeah, looks okay. And then you right-click on it. Just right-click the project, and then run. Right-click the project and run as, and then Android application. And then okay. Let me just
this time is
is that okay? It takes some time to build the project. So have you got it working on your Glass?
No.
Not yet. Yeah. Okay. So just right-click on the project, run as Android application. Yeah. Yeah. And choose that device, and then set OK. Okay, so it's now running. So have you got the application running on your Glass?
Seems APK is okay, but
Oh, I see. Sorry about that. That white Glass has, I should have, the white Glass has an older version of GDK. So that's why it's failing. Sorry about that. I'll update it later on this afternoon. So the white one has a problem using the older version.
So you actually say something 0, 0.
Yeah, 0, and if you touch on the touchpad, you'll see the touch coordinate.
Oh,
yeah.
this is the
Isn't it?
version 19. Something wrong?
No. So you're fine. You're fine. The problem is this Glass,
Okay,
white one.
This one is version 16. Target 16 or something else.
You can.
I'll try to fix it. Maybe.
No. You cannot fix it because the problem is.
Online internet.
No. The problem is this white device is running Android 4.0.3, and the GDK we have is 4.4.2. So we have to upgrade this white glass, but we'll do it later on. Okay. So unfortunately, we cannot do anything with that at the moment. And
Why each time I touch it, it's just gone away?
if you have run it already, if you can just go to make sure the screen is on, and maybe it's better to keep it on. And if you tap, there we go. Yeah. If you swipe down, it will stop the application, so it will go back to the timeline. This session?
It's online, isn't it?
It's online. Is it this? I'm not sure if this is an old one or not. That doesn't. This looks like an old one.
I'll look online. It's okay. It's fine.
So maybe I'll just wrap up this session and help you out later. So anyway, in summary, there are two different types of tools, which is Mirror API and GDK. And depending on what type of applications you are going to create, you might have to choose different tools. Or even you can actually use both of them together. So if you can think of having your own web server that pushes some timeline cards into your timeline, your customer's glass timeline, and once that card is inserted, you can also have a companion GDK app that does more interactivity as well. So that's for this session. Maybe we'll have a short 5-minute break and then come back and do the Mirror API afterwards.
If you emulate, how do you actually design the screen? You don't have emulate items for the board. You just use the standard Androids.
You can just use the XML editor on the developer environment. So there is an IDE that you can lay out different layout. Yeah.
You don't have a glass emulator.
You can't. There is no glass emulator. Yeah. But you can set the XML layout to match the screen size of the glass, and also change the DPI settings to make it quite similar to looking as if on the glass. So
in the XML, so there's specific text that's supposed to be used for glass.
No.
No. So you just use the tag there.
You can just use whatever Android tag you have with XML. So it's basically an Android phone shrunk down small and put it there. So it's basically an Android phone. But the GDK, what the GDK does is it just adds up a little bit to the Android, which is specific to glass, such as UI design and so forth. So there are certain classes that we will cover later on this week. But basically, if you are an Android developer and have been developing Android applications, then it's pretty much straightforward that you can run your app on glass. Okay, let me just